Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
That's not very nice.
Never is it?
Fair point.
Well, we did say that we were going to have a special guest here, the same as the last two episodes, Nick Moore from GFS Security, but unfortunately, he was unable to join us tonight. So me and Kevin came up with another episode for everyone, and this one's going to be good. Spoiler alert for the episode. If you don't want your childhood ruined, stop now. But I beg you, don't stop now. I want you to hear this.
This is going to unhinge some childhoods, definitely.
Oh yeah, it's a little dark.
True, very dark in some instances.
What we're getting at is that this episode's going to be about childhood fairy tales and
Their dark origins.
Disney movies, nursery rhymes, that kind of stuff that was kind of adapted to modern audiences in an extremely different light than what they were originally written as.
Oh yes, they differ from the source material greatly.
It kind of blew my mind, some of these, as we looked these up. It was really, really bad.
That was some difficult research to get through.
Oh no, not difficult at all. It was really interesting, but God, Disney changed a lot, and our culture changed a lot, nursery rhymes and stuff. The first one we want to start off with is a well-known nursery rhyme. I know I did it as a kid and in daycare and with siblings and things like that. Mm-hmm. Ring Around the Rosie. You know, classic. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Mm-hmm. That one's actually talking about the bubonic plague, or otherwise known as the Black Plague.
Or the Black Death.
Kevin, give a little background on the Black Plague, and then we'll go to the breakdown of what each portion of that nursery rhyme actually mean in reference.
Gladly. The Black Plague, or the bubonic plague, ravaged Europe from 1347 to 1351, a short amount of time, 4 years. But in that time period, about a third of the population actually died.
Numbers?
They put it at about, it varies differently.
Yeah, because population density was much lower in that time period than it is today in that area of the world, but...
So to kind of help you picture that,
it was probably thousands of people, or at least hundreds of people. Yeah.
Like if you were to see those epic numbers with the U.S. population, we're over 300 million.
Yeah, something like that.
That's over 100 million people dead in less than 5 years.
Or that day's equivalent of 100 million people.
Right. You lose a third of your population, almost overnight. What the plague was, it spread from China and other Far Eastern populations via the Silk Road, or overland trade route between Europe and China. It was fleas carried on the backs of rats. The rats traveled mostly on ships. Grain cargo is one of their favorite foods to infest, if you will. One lesser known fact about the Black Death, or the bubonic plague, was there was two strains. You had the viral strain that you get to transmitted from flea bites, but there was one known as the pneumonic plague, an airborne virus, and it was much, much more lethal. Typically, when you start to show symptoms, you'd be dead in a matter of hours to days. It was fast acting, and during this time, there's no such thing as penicillin, antibiotics, anything like that. So people were just literally piling up dead in the streets. They couldn't bury people fast enough at the rate they were dying.
And as we know, dead bodies that sit in a street decay.
And they stink.
All right, so let's get to the breakdown. Ring Around the Rosie, where the flea would bite the person, they would have a red irritation ring around the bite mark. So, ring around the Rosie. Mm-hmm. Pocket full of posy, because of the rotting corpses and just the all around just stench of
death.
Right. People would carry around potpourri or flower petals in their pocket, and when they would go through an area that had a particularly bad smell, they would actually pull those out of their pocket and hold them over their nose to kind of mask the smell.
Right.
Ashes to ashes. They would burn the bodies in their homes, their clothes, everything, because they were trying to stop the spread.
Right.
We all fall down. Obviously, it's just people dying everywhere. They're just dropping like flies.
A third of the population's gone.
So kids are dancing around in little circles and singing these nursery rhymes. They're talking about death. They're talking about a plague that happened 100 years ago.
On a truly epic scale.
Right. Kind of dark.
Yeah, very dark.
On a little less dark note, the Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty.
In Humpty Dumpty never says it was an egg.
I never mentioned it as an egg.
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall.
Mm-hmm.
All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again.
Mm-hmm.
Humpty Dumpty is about I'm not certain about who it belonged to, but I want to say it was a British cannon.
A massive cannon.
That sat on top of a castle tower that was a problem for the people trying to siege the tower.
Right. Hard to get close to.
Right. And then something happened. He was sabotaged or attacked, and they finally got this cannon to fall down, and it broke. Mm-hmm. And this whole nursery rhyme is just making fun of the British for
massive failure.
Yeah, their weapon being destroyed, and ha ha ha, you couldn't put it back together. Da da da. So while not as nearly as dark, it's not what we're. It's not about an egg. It's not a little story. It's a little story, but it's not a story that's necessarily a kid's story.
Or necessarily for children.
I mean, it's not for children. Like the first one.
The first one definitely not.
First one's definitely a bad one. But it gets worse.
It gets a lot worse.
It gets so much worse. And it makes you wonder why Disney picked these particular stories to make movies out of if they had to change them so much. Because if the children who watch these movies ever looked up these actual stories, they'd be a little scarred.
Maybe just a little bit, but
give you for instance, Cinderella.
Oh, here we go.
The daughter of a dead woman, and her father remarries. Mm-hmm. Her stepsister and her stepmother, mistreat her. She gets a fairy godmother who
must be nice.
Gets her ruby. You want a fairy godmother, Kevin? Do you need a dress and a pumpkin to ride to the ball?
I don't really like to dance, but
well, everybody knows this story, and she loses her glass slipper at the end of the night. And then the prince takes the glass slipper into town to see whose foot it'll fit on, and he's going to marry whoever the shoe fits on. Well, the stepsisters were determined that their feet were going to fit.
Very determined.
And in the movie, you see them cramming their giant feet into these shoes, and it's not fitting, whatever. Goes further than that in the original story. Mm-hmm. One sister cut her toes off to try and fit into the slipper. The other sister cut the heel of her foot off to try and fit into the slipper.
But it doesn't end there.
Oh, it goes even further. Apparently, the dead mother released some doves. I'm not sure when.
I think it was on her wedding, Cinderella's wedding day.
But the mother was already dead. But these doves were from her dead mother.
Right.
And on Cinderella's wedding day, they attacked the stepsisters and plucked their eyeballs out.
That shit is an insult to injury.
Crazy dark. Crazy dark. I mean, the doves is a little bit weird. I'm still stuck on the fact that these people were so desperate that they cut their toes and their heels off to try and fit into this shoe.
Right. Doves are normally seen as like a symbol of peace. And here they are attacking people at a wedding.
People.
Right.
But hey, I mean, if you'd seen your kid abused by your replacement, so to speak, maybe you would send some...
fair point.
But...
Mama's always got your back.
What's next, Kevin?
Sleeping Beauty was one that was just...
Oh, that one's really bad. All right. Sleeping Beauty, the story goes, she pricked her finger on a spindle.
Like a wheel for spinning yarn.
Yeah. It got a splinter in it, and she ends up asleep in a castle for an undetermined amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Prince finds her, king finds her,
King,
kisses her, wakes her up, and they live happily ever after, blah, blah. They fight the evil queen, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Original story, I'm not sure if Maleficent was even part of it, whatever, but what happened is bad enough without an antagonist.
Right.
The king finds, in the original story that was adapted into the current Sleeping Beauty, the king finds the sleeping woman, trigger alert, rapes her.
Yes.
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
To the point where she gives birth to multiple children.
While still asleep.
While still asleep. She only wakes up when one of the children actually sucks the splinter out of her finger.
Mm-hmm.
Then the king's wife, the queen,
Mm-hmm.
unbeknownst to him, attempts to get him to eat the children. He kills the queen. And then I guess they live happily ever after.
Well, as happy as you could, I suppose.
I guess. That one's crazy. That one.
That one. It's like, who's writing these stories?
Some dark stuff, man.
Dark stuff. A lot of these stories were composed by the Brothers Grimm. There was a movie made not too long ago, and they just basically went around compiling these stories from the public. So these stories were passed down through oral tradition. So these stories are being told over generations, and I think they probably just get more and more messed up as time goes on.
And then Walt Disney comes along and goes, hey, we're just going to make this all nice and sweet, and no one's ever going to know.
We're going to remove this part. You can't have
right.
picking.
We're going to take stuff out here, put stuff there. But hey, I just had a realization. Maybe the Cinderella, the doves, maybe that's why he had all in the Walt Disney version, they had all of the birds and animals helping Cinderella.
Oh, that's a good point.
I didn't even think about that when we were reading that.
He's like really in tune with nature.
Maybe that was his version of the doves that ends up taking out the sisters later.
That's the watered down children's version.
Air quotes.
Air quotes.
The fairy tale version.
There you go.
Here's another interesting one. This one's not necessarily how they changed the story itself, which I didn't look into the actual story itself, but the ending of the story. But Mulan, after she returns to her village after the war, Disney doesn't go into that, I don't believe.
No,
or she returns and everything's fine.
A big hero,
right? And that's and it ends soon thereafter. In the original, Mulan returns to her village to find her father has died. Her mother has remarried, and the Khan of the village wants her to become one of his concubines, or his concubine. I don't know if there was one of or the.
Usually multiples.
Which is, yeah. So Mulan takes her own life.
Right. I think in that story, being in the military, she found independence and self-sufficiency, and being regulated back to a less than equal role was unthinkable to her. Right.
Which they do kind of go into women being second class in Mulan, because their only duty was to be presentable, to be marryable. They did go into that in the movie, but yeah, that did end a little bit unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, where's Mushu when you need him?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, and girls, let me go ahead and apologize. I'm sorry. You are not going to be able to kiss a frog and turn him back into a prince, because that's not how it really worked in the books.
But there is another way.
In the story of a woman kissing a frog and turning him into a prince, she didn't. I think the normal mode was to cut its head off.
Cut its head off.
Basically kill it. But in the original version, she smashed him against a wall to turn him back into a prince.
You have to kill what you love.
Right. So, where did they get the idea that you had to kiss the frog to turn him into a prince?
That's your fairy tale version.
This one's a little near and dear to my heart, but also this kind of hurts my childhood. Yes, I'm a grown man, and I will admit, as a young kid, I liked The Little Mermaid. Hey, I don't care. I'll admit it. I liked The Little Mermaid.
No shame.
No shame, man.
No. This one's dark and really sad too.
It is.
Yeah.
So Ariel was granted the legs by the witch under the sea.
Under the sea.
Under the sea. But she'd never used legs before. She'd only had fins, so every step she took was agonizingly painful. And the deal she made with the witch was that Eric, or the prince, I don't know if his name was Eric in the original version, but the prince had to marry her. If he married anyone else,
anybody,
she would die and turn into sea foam.
Yeah, that's rough.
To save her, her sisters sacrificed their hair to the witch. And she gave them a dagger that Ariel had to stab the prince and kill him, and then drip his blood onto her feet. And only then could she be turned back into a mermaid.
And save her life.
And she didn't.
Right.
So...
it was literally
she
kill
died.
or be killed.
So, no, not what we got. Not what we got.
Definitely not the Disney version I remember watching.
Nope. Fox and the Hound. This was such a sweet movie that the Fox and the Hound, befriended each other and they were friends.
Unlikely friends, and it just
didn't happen.
I did not want to dig down on this one.
No, this was apparently the fox lured the hound onto some train tracks, and you know what happened. That's wrong, Kevin. Yeah. So the owner got another hound that then chased the fox to exhaustion. The fox dies. Well, the dog had exhausted itself as well.
Right. But
the owner took the dog back, nursed it back to health, just to later take it out back and shoot it, because he couldn't keep the dog in a nursing home.
Oh, the other stuff.
This is some messed up stuff, man. Well, my childhood's gone. Childhood's gone. It's just gone.
But we did put a disclaimer at the beginning of this one.
Yeah, I told you to skip it. What else we got, Kevin?
We did dig a little bit into Pinocchio.
That one's a little bit strange.
That was a little weird. Like, I'm sure there's a lot more to the story.
But we got a condensed version.
Right. It just kind of hit on, like, the main themes in that one, I think, or the main events. That one, Geppetto, brings Pinocchio to life.
I'm a real boy.
For some reason, he runs off, gets found by the authorities or police or
whatever they would have been in that time.
They assume he's been abused by Geppetto, who they in prison for child abuse.
Pinocchio kills the cricket,
the wise cricket, and how'd it go? Like Geppetto ended up
hanging himself.
I think out of guilt.
Yeah.
Definitely not the story we got from Disney on that one.
No, okay, the lamest one we found though.
Oh, there is.
Like I was expecting something really, really different for this one. Really cool about this one.
This one I wanted gore,
I did, because it's a Beauty and the Beast. I was expecting the Beast was going to be some like doing some crazy stuff,
animalistic,
But apparently the Beast just kind
of mopey.
He kept advancing on Belle, and she just kept turning him down. So then she finds him laid out, about to die, like just laying in a field, dying of heartbreak, and she cries over him, and her tears turn him back into a man from a beast. Lame. Lame. The Disney version was much cooler on that one.
Right, because he ends up fighting for her and almost dying. And then,
right.
But
he ends up beating the crap out of Gaston and stuff, man. It was much better. Much better. And then you get to see, we get to be their guest.
Must have been quite a party.
But here's the whole point of this is all we did was do a little bit of research.
Right.
A little bit of digging.
Just a little.
We didn't take Disney's version of stories. We did a little digging, and we came up with the real version.
And these are all stories most people have grown up with their entire lives.
You could say the backwards history version.
I could say that.
But that's all it takes. It takes a little bit of research. Sometimes you can find where the story's been changed. The story's been manipulated to make it easier to consume. Marketable. There's a good one.
I certainly understand why they changed these.
Oh, yeah. Imagine these stories as they are. But in the cartoon version, imagine them doing exactly what we just read them doing. But the cartoon versions that we've come to know and love, that would be a very, very different version.
That'd be horrific.
It's nuts, but that's old school Disney.
And the old school, that's original, you know.
Yeah, like the first movie Disney put out that was like that was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That's what
That's
the
another one
foundation's built off of, you know.
And Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh man.
In the real story, the evil queen sends out the huntsman to go find Snow White,
Take her to the woods.
kill her, take her liver and her lungs so that she can eat them and basically absorb her beauty through that.
Some weird stuff.
Huntsman falls in love with her, ends up marrying her. They invite to the wedding. They invite all the royals in the land. Evil queen shows up, unbeknownst to her. She didn't know whose wedding it was she was invited to. When she shows up, she finds out it's her stepdaughter,
Who's not dead.
And they force her to put on red hot iron shoes and dance until she dies. That one was cool. It's like, haha, we got you.
That is some sweet justice.
That's some evil justice,
Right.
but couldn't have happened to a nicer person. I mean, I don't know where the dwarfs were in all of this, but
Probably causing mischief or something.
or being happy, dopey, sleepy,
Bashful.
Doc, and sneezy. Yeah, it's probably all they were doing. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting set of things. I want you to look up your favorite old school Disney stories, or look up your new stuff. See what they were originally written to be. You know, Toy Story.
Oh, boy.
Toy Story would have been much creepier if they'd done it the way that they originally did. Woody, instead of a pull string rag doll, he was originally going to be a wooden ventriloquist doll. Creepy. Imagine how creepy it would have been to see a kid running around playing with a ventriloquist doll.
Yeah. And then, like, when he's not around, it talks.
Okay, yeah. That's some like Chucky stuff right there.
Some goosebumps stuff going on right there.
Right. But yeah, we just want you to go take a look for yourself, man.
Right.
Don't take our words for any of these. Look these up. Read the full story. And disclaimer: I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. If you get creeped out by this stuff, it's so interesting that the main thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is why would you pick these to rewrite?
Right.
Because they're so dark. I would have never thought of taking those and rewriting. That's like taking it and rewriting it as a fun story. I don't know. Right. So, as always, trust but verify.